chairman of many councillors, Local Government Association of Tasmania, concerned citizens, Sophie, and today's speakers. Following the Upper House vote, the Minister immediately foreshadowed that he would be bringing back the bill in an amended form. Next time the vote goes to the Upper House, the government only needs one extra vote in the Upper House to get its amended bill passed. I urge all of you here today to get in touch with as many members in both houses as soon as you are able, to remind elected members that they are there to defend our democratic rights, and they won't be doing that if they vote for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Mondale. We did have Alice Hardinge, who's the campaign manager of Wilderness Society, to speak tonight, but unfortunately she's unwell. She's going to be talking about the implications of removal of appeal rights from reserve land, including our World Heritage Areas. I can speak to that just really quickly. There's one major concern with regards to reserve land is when they released the draft framework last year, it foreshadowed significant changes to how reserve management plans were going to be made. So effectively, in our view, it was going to be easier for the government to change the plans to facilitate development. And they are calling them something else. They call them independent assessment panels, and this is a separate bill. And so we didn't confuse everybody, we just called them development assessment panels on reserve land and private land because they're effectively exactly the same thing. So, but what it would mean is we would not be able to appeal developments in our national parks or reserves or Crown land. So the public won't be able to appeal developments effectively on its own land. So we have two last speakers. Our next speaker is Victoria Wilkinson, and she's speaking from Launceston Heritage, not High Rise, and she'll be talking briefly about the implications of removal of appeal rights on, for example, Launceston's urban landscape. Thanks, Victoria.
Thanks for coming, and thanks to the other speakers and to PMAT for facilitating this meeting. In 2021, Elizabeth Farrelly wrote a book entitled Killing Sydney, and I want to start with a quote from it. Conflict is inevitable in cities and up to a point healthy. This context generates polarities, spectrums along which all cities must locate themselves. Fast, slow, old, new, private, public. This process generates tensions which, up to a point, are invigorating, a kind of yoga stretch for cities, changing, not stagnant. But this dynamic is like a tug of war. If it becomes all one way, if all the power and money is on one side and all the small and weak are on the other, the contest is over. This is always bad. It's bad for the small and the voiceless, it's bad for the fabric of the city and its balance of diverse buildings, thoroughfares, open spaces, frontages and streetscapes, allowing the big, fast and glassy to obliterate the small, slow and sweet. And it's bad for the city's soul. I know that sounds a bit touchy-feely, but the fact is we don't do this for the power glory, let alone the money. We do it because we care about Tasmania, we're passionate and we want its development to be as the best it can be. Minister Ellis, this means meeting in the middle. Don't be a last century bully using labels like anti-everything organisations that put up baseless objections for the sake of stalling progress. The 7th of February press release reveals how weak his argument is, hence the resort to name calling to push through the legislation to remove what he calls the red tape. Let's be clear, the red tape he wants to remove is us. We are the red tape. To quote Eric Abetz, we have to be brought to heel. He said that. He said it about forest protesters, but protesters are our neighbours, our community, they're us. Those who want more than a token say, because that's all this legislation allows, a token say. Sadly, why would you bother? That's all we can say. There is no tea. However this legislation is formed, its intention is to remove appeal rights, as we've heard. Something developers have sought since 2014, even even though government's own data shows only 1% of developments statewide go to appeal. So what's an appeal? It lies at the heart of our democratic planning process, and it's never done lightly, nor should it be. An appeal ensures that the system is checked and balanced. When a development relies on performance criteria of the planning scheme, it's open to interpretation. An appeal tests the merit of these interpretations, providing a mechanism for accountability, often as valuable as a full appeal. And let's remember, it begins with the possibility of mediation, which has been talked about tonight. Often that's as valuable as a full appeal. 80% of appeals are resolved through mediation. The appeals process strengthens the system. Stripping it away, as Ellis and his supporters propose, will concentrate power in the hands of a distant few, leaving communities voiceless and vulnerable. When Susie Kai launched an appeal against the Gorge Hotel in 2019, Launceston Heritage Not High Rise was formed to support her. This appeal successfully challenged the interpretation of the planning scheme. As you may know, the council later changed the goalposts and the planning amendment to suit a resubmitted PA. In 2020, we appealed the Fragrance Hotel complex planned for the block bordered by Cimetière Tamer and William Street. We tested whether the development satisfied performance criteria for site contamination, height, and the appropriateness to the local context. While we succeeded on the site contamination, we failed on height and local context. At the time, council was stated to the council about to pass the development. I believe this hotel could end up being regarded like the Telstra and Myer buildings. This building is too high, and what's worse, well be used to justify an even taller building in the near future. This is what will happen with both the Gorge and Fragrance hotels once they are built. Future similar proposals will go untested with this legislation. This is what will add value to low-rise Launceston. Lastly, I thank PMAT for being the rope on which we can collectively pull back against those who would seek to dominate our land and buildings. Please talk, as others have said, please talk to your local councillors and state members and press upon them the importance of rejecting this legislation. Tasmania's strength lies in its communities, in its diversity of voices and its commitment to balance. Adapted legislation would fundamentally undermine this strength.
Our last speaker is James Johnson. We're very fortunate to have him here this evening. He's a solicitor with the Environmental Defenders Office, and he will talk at a higher level about the importance of public participation rights and the fundamental problems with the approach taken by the Development Assessment Panel Bill. And after James has spoken, I'll ask you to take a really simple action, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. Thanks very much, James.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am honoured to be here today, and I was going to speak about at a high level about public participation, but having heard from some of these earlier speakers, I don't know there's much more I can add, particularly since you've got the person who effectively drafted legislation here tonight, addressing you with some slides on that very issue. Can I just say briefly about the Environmental Defenders Office, where I come from? I rejoined the EDO in July 2024. I was the director of the EDO in the 1990s. I was with the EDO from 1990 to 1999, and then I left, and I've been a barrister for 22 years. As a barrister, there's a cap-brand principle, and you take briefs from wherever they come from. So I specialised in environmental law. Probably 50% of my briefs came from applicants and 50% from local councils. So I got to see the planning process at really close quarters, and it's not pretty. It's a bit like making sausages. You don't want to see how they're made. But one thing to come out of that is that the devil really is in the detail, and the timeline. Earlier speakers were talking about being able to get across the detail, being able to understand, and the gondola was a classic. You know, you've got a smattering of documents. It's really complex, but nothing that really counts and nothing that really shows you how it's going to operate. And how it's going to operate is fundamental. One simple example is I was acting for a council in a case where there was a driveway leading down underneath, and the trucks were going to collect the garbage underneath. And there's something just didn't look quite right about it. And I mean, this is a matter that had been poured over by the council for a couple of months before it went to appeal, and it was appealed on the Land Environment Court, and the expert had again looked at it for about a month. It was only with the witness in the box in cross-examination that it tweaked that the line showing the gradient for the driveway was down the middle of the driveway, and where it turned was on the inside of the turn, with a much steeper gradient. So if this truck had to stop for anything at any time, it wouldn't have the power to keep going. If it stopped for a pedestrian coming down the driveway or whatever, it'd have to reverse back down around. Of course, the gate's an automatic gate, it would have closed behind it. Those sorts of problems. So when you've got 10 days or whatever they're proposing in this bill to make submissions, and a very short timeline, even if they're very capable experts on this development assessment panel, there is nothing like leaving things to stew for a while, having the time to pore over documents, because while the devil's in the detail, the applicant will want to bury that detail, and they're very good at it. Plans are really complex documents. If you want to read and understand them, it does take it takes a long time. Even things, and like the Land and Environment Court, commissioners get caught out too. If things aren't marked on the plan in the way that they should be, then you won't pick up. There's what can be significant impacts at a cursory glance. So just in terms of public participation, we have local government for very good reasons. Those who make decisions that affect us in our homes, those people who live among us, who know the area and its values, who have local knowledge, they're answerable to us as a community, certainly at the ballot box, and they're more accessible to us. This facilitates our participation in environmental decisions, and as has been pointed out, ultimately, at the moment, we have the right to take those decisions on appeal to TASCAT if we disagree with them. Councils aren't perfect. I did an addition to my house where I put on an extra room, and it took 2 years to chase it through council. It wasn't controversial, but in my experience, it basically comes down to under-resourcing. And if councils were adequately resourced in order to have the time and the expertise to put into developments, and sometimes it might be a matter of buying in, like getting a consultant in for particular developments. If you only get one hard rock quarry every 2 or 3 years, you don't need a hard rock quarry specialist on whatever it might be. So rather than fund and create a separate body, fund local government so that they can do the job. And I'm just echoing on what David said. There's so many things that I heard today were matters that have occurred to me over the course of my career. I think it'd be great to have an RTI to the right to information request to the minister to work out exactly who are these people and which cases was he talking about. Because if you have an analysis, and all TASCAT decisions are up on the web. I've gone through 2024 to try and identify which of these cases have fallen into those baskets, and I couldn't find them. The DAP bill. Draft legislation, bills are drafted by Parliamentary Council. And Parliamentary Council are generally fairly conservative people. They are very disciplined, they understand the history of laws and things like that, and the importance of drafting laws that will work. They must be tearing their hair out of this one because, you've got these wide, undefined criteria like controversial. I mean, controversial means it's awful. So that's the first thing, the wide, undefined criteria. Then you've got the minister. Minister's the person who decides whether it falls into one of those categories. And then the applicant could elect to pursue that path or not. And it looks to me, and I don't know, I didn't have a close enough look at the bill, But it looks to me like halfway through the process before a council, an applicant might be able to change their mind and then elect to go a different path if it looks like they're going to go down the tubes. So that doesn't facilitate a quick decision. It said to me, someone was saying to me today that, oh, well, New South Wales has got panels, and it is true. We have, in certain decisions, we have panels, but firstly, that was a loss for us. You don't look to the mainland for everything in terms of being a good precedent. That's not. At least the categories are mandatory and they're spelled out clearly defined. So once you reach a certain threshold, it becomes it goes to an independent planning commission. Appeals from those decisions remain unless the IPC has a public hearing. It's not as good as having a right of appeal to a court, but the public hearings are full hearings with rights of people to appear and make submissions before the commission. There's also a broader participation framework in New South Wales, and it includes the right for any person to bring proceedings in the Land and Environment Court to remedy or restrain a breach of any act which is causing or likely to cause harm to the environment. And that's a tremendously powerful provision to have as part of your armoury of public participation. I also saw that press release about proposed limits on appeals to TASCAT, and that's very concerning. I haven't had the time to talk with Sophie about that press release. When I read it, I saw person agreed, and person agreed has a special meaning in law. It's developed. It's a test for the right to bring proceedings for people who have a sufficient interest. And I do think when I read that, it's not limited to necessarily people who live next door, but it will depend. And what this was going to lead to is your first day of hearing will be about whether you are a person agreed. And then rather than proceed with the hearing and calling experts and those sorts of things after that, you'd think they'll probably have to wait and have a determination about that and make a ruling about whether you're a person agreed. Now that's something that I would take on. You could easily take that to the Supreme Court and challenge the determination about whether you've got standing. This is not a recipe for fast, efficient decision making. So if it's person agreed, it may well include conservation groups, local and incorporated groups who have a history and a track record of interest in that particular subject matter. So if you've been beavering away about the gorge and gondolas and things like that, and you can show that track record, then there's every chance you will establish that you are a person agreed. I ran a case for the Tasmanian Conservation Trust in 1996 against the Guns, the wood chip company, where we overturned the wood chip export licence. And the first challenge we had in the federal court was to establish standing. And the court held that the Tasmanian Conservation Trust with a history of involvement in forest issues, with some funding from the government, recognition on various committees and those sorts of things, participation in government committees as well, established a sufficient interest in the subject matter of this case. But that's a judicial determination. It's not something that a DAP ought to be, and it may well have to go off to the court before the DAP, if the DAP rules you don't have standing, it's likely to have to go off to court for final determination. But if those limits on appeals to TASCAT come in, that would be, I think, a real loss for the community. I think that's probably all I wanted to say.
Our interpretation of the media release was obviously slightly different to James's, but let's just see what the draft legislation looks like. So, but that was our interpretation, that it would be very difficult for community groups to take an appeal. So I'd like all the speakers to come up the front. So there might be a bit of moving to do. So as we're doing that, if the speakers will, we're going to have questions once all the speakers are up here. Can someone help move the lectern, please? And you're and we'll have seats up the front too. We'll just get this. We've got a take-home action flyer for you, and unfortunately the people who did our printing, we asked for 200 and they printed 60. But we've got this flyer here, and the first QR code takes you to our subscribe page. So if you have one of these, also I will hand round, there should be a whole lot of boards around. If you'd like to sign up to receive our email updates, or you can scan the QR code and just fill in, which will automatically go to our website. Essentially, we would love people to sign up to receive our emails, because effectively what will happen, the state government will announce we're assuming the state government will announce that the draft legislation will be out for comment. But it won't be local councils doing that consultation, it'll be the state government. So most people in the community won't actually know that it's happening. So if you would like to sign up to receive our email alerts, we will be alerting people to the fact that it is out for comment, and we will no doubt be making some kind of submission guide as well, because Planning Matters Alliance, for example, we do have 75 community groups, but we're a tiny organisation, and so we can't do this without you. So we really need the community to engage in this, otherwise our voice will be removed. So we would love you to sign up to receive our email updates. So those boards are going around. But this Take Action flyer also has a list of things that we would love you to do. So talking to your local council, asking their position on what these planning appeal changes, what are they